This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
Good evening and welcome to the Brighton Central School District Board of Education business meeting for February 25th, 2020. To begin this evening, I remind folks who may be watching us either on the live stream or on cable, we are beginning our regular meeting approximately at 5 p.m. this evening because this is one of our community forum evenings. So the board will conduct this business meeting, but then we'll reconvene at 7 p.m. here in the room for a community forum focused on our budget situation and where we currently stand. And if you would like to join us, you're welcome to come to that meeting in person at 7, and you can also join in online also. So we encourage that if you're able. So thank you on that. To begin this evening, we offer the opportunity for public participation. Any members of the public who are here in attendance are welcome to ask a question or make a comment. Is there anyone who would like to do that this evening? Seeing that we have none right now, Board, may we please have a motion to approve the agenda for the evening?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Marv, seconded by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Then a motion for approval of the minutes from our February 11, 2020 education meeting, please.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Andrea and seconded by Christina. Does anyone have any corrections, additions to those minutes, deletions? Then all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So we'll turn it over now to Dr. Kevin McGowan to provide a budget review, current status of where we are on the budget discussion for the 2020-2021 budget year. So, Dr.
Thank you
McGowan.
very much. So this is the next step in the process. We review this each time to let you know where we are right now. Of course, we begin by assessing our needs, take a look at issues within the budget, design plans, and right now determine our financial capabilities. So tonight is really the first time where we'll give you a preview of where we are, rolling over the 1920 budget into the 2021 budget and explaining where we are relative to revenues anticipated and expenses expected going into next year. The projected revenues just shows, again, we emphasize with people that about 66% of our total revenues are in property taxes. Fund balance makes up about 5.61%. Of course, those are also property taxes. You think about the fact that that is from previous years and the community's support of us being able to maintain a fund balance. Local sources, different revenues that come in over time, and state and federal is about 20%. So that's our state aid and then federal aids as well. Local sources being additional grants and revenues. The tax cap calculation is part of tonight's presentation too, and you are being asked later on in the agenda to approve the tax cap calculation, which we need to submit by March 1st to the state of New York. Ironic that you're being asked to approve it because you can't really not approve it. My point is, we ask you to approve it so that we're making the public very aware of it and that you as a board have reviewed it. You're essentially approving your review of it, but the calculation is provided by the state. We don't have an option in our tax cap number. And really what it does, this calculation takes last year's levy, and the cap is really the allowable levy growth from one year to the next without having to achieve a supermajority. So in other words, last year we asked to go beyond the allowable growth that the state's calculation gives us, and that required us to have over 60% plus one, of voters approve that proposed levy. They did not. The under the cap proposal only requires a majority, a simple majority, so 50% plus one. And so what we want to make sure that we're pointing out to people is what that is going into next year. Pilots receivable are included in the calculation, and the allowable levy growth factor that's given to us by the state is 1.01. It's not 2%, and this has to do with the consumer price index. It is not 2%. The growth factor was just 1%. So when we calculate pilots receivable, the allowable growth factor from the state of New York, and carryover of a grand total of $41 from fiscal year 2020, the result is 1.95%, but we're not done there. The change for us that's different this year is in including the capital expense. So if you look at the second check mark down in the second group towards the bottom, our spending next year in capital, our debt service, is a little over $1.6 million. I'll show you that amount in just one second. The state only allows us to exclude 47% of that capital spending next year. The $1.6 million, the debt service, the new debt service, they only allow us to pull out 47% of that from our cap. And that's $731,671. So the total exclusions for us are simply $731,671, resulting in an allowable levy increase to $55,274,666. That's 3.33%. So that's our cap number, again, based on the state's calculation. 3.33% is our cap number. We cannot exceed that unless 60% of voters plus one would say it would be all right to do that. And the under the cap number or at the cap number is 50%, again, plus one. The preliminary budget right now, if we look at the 19-20 budget compared to the 2020 budget, we're looking at 3.2% increase or $1.1 million in salaries. That doesn't mean that every individual receives 3.2%. That means spending in that area, in that budget area, is up 3.2% based on anticipated need for staff members and the cost of each of those staff members. We're up 6.5% in benefits or $1.4 million. Relatively speaking, that's a low number considering what community-rated health insurance plans are going up, typically double-digit. We're able to keep our spending in this particular area at 6.5% going into next year. We have an increase of $940,000 for BOCES expenses. Again, that's program-driven for students. I'd like to point out in the governor's proposal, he has recommended collapsing BOCES aid into the foundation aid number. This is part of the reason why that's a big problem. We are sending enough students and programs, spending enough on program at BOCES to go up $940,000. His proposal would be that that would get lumped into the larger foundation aid number. That number will be very different district to district. We would not, under his proposal in future budget years, be guaranteed a dollar for dollar the way the aid is supposed to run based on BOCES expenses. Beside the point, but important to factor when we think about the governor's proposal. Supplies and services up $883,000 in next year's budget. And as I mentioned, the debt service up $1.6 million, so we need to start to pay on the debt that we are incurring for the capital project. So right now, that would result in a 7.6% increase in spending in the preliminary budget, 5.5% on operations, and that 2.1% being additional capital expense, which we knew about, voters approved in 2017. Now the bill is starting to come due in pieces, which means our current deficit between projected new spending of $6.1 million and new revenue of $3.5 million, and that's our state aid figure and our 3.3% increase in the levy. If we're projecting that to be our tax increase, the gap between the capped number in the levy and aid coming in and what we anticipate our expenses to be at this moment is $2.7 million. So $2.7 million is the gap that we need to talk about with you and with our community and the focus of our forum tonight. What are the factors contributing to the spending that we can talk about, and we can talk about making adjustments to close that gap? And I would point out, to close that gap could also happen if the legislature and the governor could come to agreement on a budget that would fully fund our foundation aid formula. It would by far close that gap. Even if we were a closer percentage to our neighbors, we would be much closer in terms of closing that gap. So we would continue to ask people to contact their legislators, contact any legislators, work with Fight for Brighton. All the contact information is there. That needs to happen. We make a big, big difference. The factors contributing to increased spending, teaching staff adjustments for mandated services, restoring our planning for full-day kindergarten. So remember, in the final budget last year, the second budget vote, we took money from the full-day kindergarten planning to pay for current programming. The non-mandated programming that we need to talk about whether or not we reduce in this year's budget or not was paid for through those positions, the full-day kindergarten positions. We are factoring those back in because we need to plan for those. So that's part of it. We are accounting for minimum wage increases and the impact on that compression for hourly staff. What that means is when we increase minimum wage in the salary schedule and in the group of employees, people at the minimum wage level, then when they push up, the people right above them, they don't end up equalized. There's a gap in pay for their experience, their time, their expertise within the district. There is an increase incremental for them as well. So their base being a minimum wage is increasing, which means there's compression in that scale, and there needs to be an increase for them as well. And we roll forward our current contract provisions minus what we already know around retirement, so the breakage. So we've already accounted for that in this current state of the budget. Health insurance. This is assuming an inflation trend at 8.5%. I know I mentioned 6.5% being the number. That's because that is what the current projected spending is based on the number of people in the plans, not just based on the rate. So just like the salaries doesn't mean everybody's going up 3.2%, but the spending in that area goes up 3.2%. Likewise, here we're looking at an 8.5% trend in terms of that number. And the 1920 budget is trending at a deficit relative to health insurance. So in other words, what we budgeted for and what people opted for are two different numbers. And that is because contractually people have a right to join our health insurance plan. So if, for example, local employers laid people off, and they did, and people lost their health insurance through another provider, they have an opportunity through open enrollment in their contract provisions to sign on to our health insurance. So what we anticipated in that area and what we are currently spending, there is a deficit because more people opted in than we would have expected. The retirement system pension rates will go up 10.25%. That is a bill they send us. We don't have a choice. And that also includes growth in base wages. Our percentage increase is based on the base wages that we are paying as well. Our payroll taxes will increase relative to the change in personnel costs. So if we're adding people, if that number in the salary line goes up 3.2% based on the people we are hiring and replacing, then the payroll taxes goes up as well. And then other benefits, workman's comp were a better loss factor than we would have expected, and so that's where we may have realized a little bit of a gain. If you look at that spending, is down 12.2%. That's because we did better on the workman's comp side than we would have anticipated in the budget. Other factors around spending, we have to look at business technology services, a $70,000 investment that is to comply with Ed Law 2D and the SHIELD Act, which in other words protects our data, and we are required to make those changes to our system, a $70,000 cost. Technology department supplies and contracts that we used from the tech reserve before. As we draw down the tech reserve, we have to begin to shift those expenses to the general fund, and that reflects that in this budget. Special education, this particular cost, and it's listed as a 22.3% increase. That's based on current enrollments and replenishing the risk reserve in that area that we have spent down over time as well. And then in terms of transportation, we're looking also at an increase in that area of 5.9%, and that's because of current program mandates plus inflation adjustments as we think about driver shortages and having to recruit more drivers when there is a shortage. Unemployment being a historically low number right now is great if we think about the economy and the fact that people are working. It's bad in terms of some of the positions that we fund in schools and in our budget. It means it's harder to recruit people. It means wages need to go up. Again, bad relative to your cost for your taxes, good relative to the people in those positions. And when we think about a living wage and how we support those particular positions, but that's the financial reality for us in our budget planning. A variety of spending factors, again, in these particular areas, and the details around those I would share with you is thinking about our audit contracts. That's a $10,000 increase. We bid those, we go out with RFPs for those, but that's the plan going into next year. We're able to reduce our utilities and our custodial costs right now by $76,000 just based on our current trends. We monitor those. We talk to you all the time about monitoring our budget expenses through the course of the year. This is an example of that. We're able to reduce that going into this next year. We deferred, and this is an important one when we look at maintenance projects, we deferred spending in terms of equipment, again, in the second budget last year, saying we were going to borrow out of that line to pay for a non-mandated program in this year's budget. We would restore $144,000. We have to fulfill some of those equipment requests that we put off for a year. Current enrollment in charter school tuitions, again, that's a bill that we are sent. We don't have a choice in that. It often happens for us that families who are currently attending charter schools as residents of the Rochester City School District come to Brighton, they want their child to continue in that charter school, and they have every right to do that. Eventually come to our school when, this is just a typical case, not every one of these certainly, but when we have breaks, for example, our K to 2 break, or our 5 to 6 break, or our 8 to 9 break, that's when it's the right entry point for their family. So they continue to attend the charter school, but we get the bill for their attendance at the charter school, and again, that's their right to do that. We don't have a choice there, and I don't think it speaks to what we do. I think it speaks to what is best for that family in their estimation. Our current tuitions, as I mentioned, the $113,000 in special education costs that will go up. And contract transportation, we currently have a deficit this year based on out-of-district runs and additional monitors. And these are, again, special education costs incurred based on student need. And so we're running at a deficit this year. We try and plan for as much breakage as possible. When I said we need to refund our breakage, this is why. We then operate at deficit in these areas because we've budgeted so close to our actual expense now for several years. Textbooks, professional development, consulting, et cetera, largely our textbook spending drives that up $224,000. And I skipped past it, but I want to point out again the $1.6 million in our current debt service as well is important to consider in this, and we knew that bill was coming due, which is again why we had proposed an over-the-cap number last year. So what are our short-term options at this point? Well, we can look at additional fund balance to bridge the gap until the facility improvement project aid begins to flow. We are asking for an early release of that aid for Council Rock and the high school, but that request to the state is pending. The temporary revenue could close the gap by $900,000. So if we used fund balance, essentially the savings account, while we anticipate that additional early release of aid from the state, that is an option of $900,000. We could defer the phase-in for the full-day kindergarten and use aid in future years that is intended for that purpose to support rolling into full-day kindergarten. We could use additional monies right now that we have budgeted for that to bridge part of the gap. I will caution you, the problem in doing that is we eventually have to pay that bill. So the phase-in of the aid is only over 2 years. We will still then need to incur the cost of each of the teachers that we are adding to that. It is deferring a bill until later on, but that may be an option that we choose to do while we continue to advocate for more aid, and when we do further analysis of that full-day conversion aid, which we'll present to you over the next several weeks as we explore each of these options. And then the long-term option certainly could be to go over the cap or present to the community an option to go over the cap going forward. Our sense is that is not favorable to the community, and the thought exchange feedback and the feedback we got last year was that that's not something the community would like to do. But you as a board need to understand that that is an option for you to look at. 1% on the levy is $535,000, and you could certainly present that to the community. Expenditure reductions using proportion and targeted approach. Essentially, what this is the rest of the way in the gap is to look very specifically then at programming. This will impact students. This is in the areas that are non-mandated that we cited last year and that we presented to the community as options going forward. None of them are preferred. None of them are areas that we would recommend, but they may be the reality as we continue to pursue the budget process. So our next steps are to continue to monitor our current budget to actual spending. You noticed several of the items I presented to you are based on real spending right now relative to whether it's special education tuitions, contract transportation, et cetera. We need to continue to monitor that and see if there are opportunities to make any additional reductions or where we have to account for additional spending that is coming up right now. And we will continue to work with building principals and department managers to look at areas we can continue to be more efficient, look at cost reduction strategies, but also to really understand the impact of making changes to our instructional programming, to our non-mandated programming, to our clubs and activities, to the courses that make us who we are, but also are non-mandated and are part of the consequence of last year's budget vote. I want to point out that there's none of that type of spending or those non-mandated programs, none of it is what we want to be reducing. We would like to be able to maintain all of those programs. This is not a desire because that was voted on last year then to pursue that just because. It is because this is the reality, and it's the reality that we had talked about being on the horizon. Questions about the budget as it stands right now?
Kevin, the early release of state aid, building aid that you mentioned that we've applied for, percentage-wise chance of doing that? Is that pretty common for districts to do that? Do we have any odds on that at all?
It's not uncommon to request that, but it's really hard to.
Hard to know, right?
To know whether or not that will be released.
I just want, I assume we must, in our advisors and the people we work with on this, they must have some belief that it's possible, or we wouldn't have bothered.
Yes, absolutely. And that's part of our advocacy efforts, is to ask for that release, because it's not just about our foundation aid, but to ask for early release
Right.
of that money as well.
Right.
And if we don't receive the early release, then it's scheduled to phase in the 21-22 school year?
Yes, or beyond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we know when we'd know on that? at all?
No,
No
no
way to
idea.
know, right? Typical of that type of thing, the state ad.
You know when you know.
Yeah. Okay, I guess the only comment I would make is we have a lot to talk about and a lot to discuss with the community and with, amongst ourselves as we move forward. You have given us updates over the last couple of weeks. We've understood that our situation is not great. It's still not great. The one thing I would remind folks in the community as we continue to discuss, decisions were made last year based on a failed vote to override the cap. And we made it work. You've all made it work for us this year. But we said at that time, and I will say again tonight, that the consequences of that failed vote are here. They didn't go away. And they'll have to be dealt with this year and next year and the year after. So we understand the community's reluctance to raise the levy and vote no, but we still have to work through that situation that was created by that voting of no. And you mentioned it in your budget review. So on top of where we are right now in current funding and current spending, we still have that background of that issue that we weren't able to address last year, and things that were put off down the road and decisions deferred and things like that still have to be paid, so.
Right, and, I want to make one other point, though, about that, because today's paper has an article about the property tax rebate check in that program, and that program has expired, and that there's essentially then no longer that penalty that was talked about quite a bit in the community last year for going over the cap. That is correct, that at the moment, that program has expired, and that the governor did not, in his proposal, ask for that to be reinstated. We believe that there's a strong likelihood that there will be a program, and that legislators will want there to be a program, and then in the final budget agreement, there may be a program, which again doesn't come until April 1st, so we don't know that. So I anticipate, not to get too far into the weeds, but I want to make sure this is clear to people, I anticipate people saying to us, listen, you could probably go over the cap now because there's not this rebate check. And there's a penalty last year, but now you can do it and there won't be a penalty. We believe there will likely be a penalty. We have a governor that tends to actually opt for penalties, and I believe that there will still be in the final resolution something along those lines and some type of rebate check. It's, hard to believe that wouldn't happen. Regardless, though, I think the other issue that people have said to us is the amount is a concern too, right? So the percentage increase. Our percentage increase to get all the way to $2.7 million is, I think, ballpark, in my mind, around 8-point-something%. So we're not proposing that to people. We would not be proposing that to people. And we would not feel comfortable proposing, I think, very much higher than the cap number anyways because of the impact on the levy. It's not just about the penalty and rebate. It's also the penalty of having to pay more tax, which
Right.
none of you as a board have wanted to do, and on behalf of your friends, neighbors, and community members, want to propose that either. So I think that's something that's been on our mind as well.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, and that is where our thinking has been. And we've talked about it for years, that all of us who live here and own property and pay taxes are unfairly paying far too much in school taxes because of the state's failure to fund the foundation aid formula. And we continue to fight, and we'll talk a little bit more tonight about advocacy and what we continue to do to try to get, even as you said earlier, even if we could get that raised from the 50-ish% or 51%, I guess we're almost up to now, of what we're due. Part of the theory and thinking among some is trying to get it to a 60% floor. Even that would be a huge help to us, and to local property taxpayers.
Correct.
Really, for years, and Brighton have duly supported a great school system, but in many ways to an unfair size of burden, so. All right. Thank you very much,
You bet.
Kevin, and
Thank
we
you.
appreciate that. And we'll have lots more to talk about tonight, specifically 7 p.m. in our community forum on the budget, and then nearly every day from now on in, so. Thank you. All right, our reports section this evening, folks, our financial report, we have actually the 3 different reports: the executive summary report from Lou dated February 5th, the general fund balance sheet, and all of those reports, including all the different funds. And then we also have for Maureen the student activities funds from the high school and the middle school, and where those are in accounting. So does anyone have any questions or comments? Then can we have a motion to receive all of these reports, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Larry, seconded by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, our student report. Theo. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. So the district at large just returned from its midwinter recess, and this break was particularly special for the students of BHS because they were all over the world. So the high school organized trips to Israel, an exchange in Bremen, Germany, Spain. AP European history students were in southern France and Switzerland. And although I was not personally on any of these trips, it looked like fun, and I'm sure they were very thankful for them. Our winter sports are wrapping up. Barons are definitely making impacts, especially in the skiing, section. So the girls' Nordic team won Section 5 championships, with Zofia Stefankovic winning individually. And on the boys and alpine side, Ben Como won the Section 5 championship.
Theo, can I give you some breaking news?
Yes.
Yeah.
The Nordic team won the state championship.
Oh my
today.
goodness.
The team and an individual title, yes?
Grace Mann.
Team,
Grace
Grace,
did
yes,
team
also.
too.
Yep.
Yeah, I heard she was a sixth sectional, so I guess she made her comeback in the States.
Yeah.
So yeah, congrats to them. Hopefully some other teams can make runs in sectionals. Basketball maybe, probably not, but
They both play
Never know.
at Churchville tomorrow night, 7:15.
Yeah.
Boys play at 7:15, girls before that.
that's right.
Oh, they both play there?
Yep.
Oh, that's pretty convenient.
Today we had a student senate meeting attended by our very own Board of Education. I think the board did a great job at familiarizing the students with their responsibilities, their priorities, their duties, and also on another note, encouraging the students to get out in the community and advocate for their interests. Considering our financial situation for one, I think it's important that students voice what they feel is important to their academic experience, and hopefully, a couple will come out at the community forum tonight. And then I'm just going to finish off the report by listing a couple events that are coming up. So there's the district-wide string concert tomorrow, and then the BHS production of High School Musical on Thursday at 6 and Friday and Saturday at 7. So, come out in the community and support that, and I'm sure the students will be very thankful.
That's great. Thank you very much, Theo. And, and I do think that the district-wide strings, which is in the high school gym, high school musical is going to be at French Road in the cafetorium.
That's right.
I think they're live streaming, at least the district-wide
District
strings is
strings,
being
yeah.
live streamed,
I don't
right?
think I don't
Yeah.
think the musical.
I don't think the musical is, but get there early, and it's general admission, and, again, our thanks from the board to our performing arts folks, our kids, our families, our teachers, and certainly our leadership. It's been a difficult year with facilities, we understand that, and we appreciate everybody's flexibility in making it work, and it really has worked. I mean, the event, I've been to the events, we've used every space we have pretty much, and we've just made it work, so thank you for that. And thank you to the Student Senate. I apologize, I was not able to make it this morning, but most of the group was. It's always one of our great highlights of the year, enjoy to have that conversation one-on-one with a lot of our students. So thank you for facilitating it. So,
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
okay. Our Board of Education reports, our standing committees from Monroe County School Boards Association, our labor relations. I'll start off with labor relations.
That's tomorrow, and Bruce Caperon from Honeyett Falls Lama is going to talk about what every school board member should understand. I assume it's going to be on budget.
Reserves.
Yeah,
He's got,
reserves.
my understanding is it's an interactive, he's reminding people to bring your smartphone, and it's supposed to be a top-notch presentation, I hear,
Yeah.
in advance billing, but it is on reserves
Yeah.
and really what every board member needs to know. You're absolutely right.
Unfortunately, I won't be there, so I hope we have some attendance. I
Okay.
think I reported on the last one, January 22nd, they talked about recruitment in a competitive market.
That's what it was, yeah, we did.
Yeah.
You know what, we might not have, because that was right the day
Yeah.
after the last business meeting, so.
And actually, the discussion was a lot of stuff that we're doing.
Good.
So it turned out to be, they were talking about recruiting faculty members of color, et cetera, and it was tough to get people to come, so.
That's great. And I did see a note today, too, that the March meeting, 25th, is the annual update on our health plan, so
Right.
That's always an interesting one to go. All right, thanks, Marv, I appreciate that. Information exchange, Julene, and I will mention to the folks, Theo mentioned the trips. We have a number of our folks that were with the adult group on the Israeli exchange that are on their way home tonight from Toronto, so Julene is among that group, Lou, Nicole, our teacher representatives, so
They've landed safely.
they've
Yes.
landed safely, or I think they're on a bus or about on a bus to come home, so. Information exchange, I'm not sure
Yeah.
who made the January 29th.
Actually, none of the 29th or the
Well, remember
12th.
they added an extra
Yeah.
meeting. The 29th was the one where they had
The-
people from the National Center for Missing and Exploited
Yeah,
Services. And they
I went to
talked-
that one.
Did you go to that one? Was that interesting?
It was interesting. I think for us, I think the most interesting thing would be sort of digital safety.
Okay.
That was one of the things that they talked about, which they have good resources and they're all free on their website. And then the next meeting's coming up just in a couple of weeks.
And then there was, were you able to make that February 1st meeting on
12th, yeah,
cultivating lifelong readers?
I wasn't able to.
Yeah, Julene did go to that one, I know, and she thought that was pretty well done, but I was not able to make that one either. And then March 11th, I do want to make a point here. You've probably seen the notice on that, but the March 11 meeting is on unconscious bias, Sadie Fisher. And we helped facilitate that, to get that put together. Debbie helped me make a contact and get that pushed along way back when. And I will tell you this, one of the things that I've been talking with the office about is utilizing Sadie, and I think they're talking to her in a broader way to put together programming on unconscious bias for board members beyond an information exchange. Maybe a set series of programs type of thing. So this will be the first, and, we worked with her as a group, all of us, and
Is that the regular noon time?
it's a regular noontime meeting on March 11th, yeah. But the hope is, and they're talking to her, she's very,
She's busy.
she's jam-packed. So they're working on it, and we also have a couple of other contacts that Becky has been talking to and looking to put maybe a series of programs together around specifically that topic for all of us. So just so you know, that meeting's the March 11th one. Legislative Committee, Karen, the
On February 5th,
February
right?
5th meeting, you were at that meeting, I was on vacation. That was prep meeting for.
It was, prep meeting for our legislative breakfast. We talked a good deal about foundation aid and the situation whereby the governor has collapsed the reimbursable aids into foundation aid, and potentially how harmful that can be to districts and our ability to budget in coming years, without being able to predict, as we currently can, how we'll be reimbursed for expenses the state is constitutionally obligated to help us pay. So there was a great deal of conversation about that at the meeting as well as at the breakfast. And given that we knew, legislative breakfast runs very smoothly, this group has done that for many years.
So just to
Facility's
preface, so
great,
that
right?
meeting, that legislative committee meeting on Wednesday the 5th
Fifth.
led into
the
legislative breakfast. A number of you
right.
attended on
Right,
Saturday,
on
the 8th.
Saturday. And it was disappointing how few legislators legislators frankly bothered to come. And I know we're in a situation where we have a lot of retirements coming up, but it really drove home that point I've been talking about, that we've been talking about for the past couple months, is how very unrepresented we feel right now. And from the, I sat at Rich Funke's table with an aide, and she duly texted Senator Funke all of our concerns, and his response was, well, I'm so sorry that I'm not in the majority. There's really nothing I can do for you. And that is an answer I have heard again and again and again, and I'm really ready to stop hearing it.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because we've talked about a lot at legislative committee. We've talked about it some in our group in this room. And the stark reality of politics in New York State has never been clearer, I don't think, in 20 years than it is right now in terms of Monroe County, greater Monroe County, our representation and what we're missing. And one of the things with the number of folks that are retiring or leaving office voluntarily, they still have a job to do until the term is over. And in our case specifically, we need help on this budget with foundation aid, and we need a fix, and we have told them specifically, and they know about it, and we're not the only ones left high and dry in many ways in representation. And Joe Robach has been great with us, but Joe would tell you the same thing. He's not in the majority anymore, and his ability to actually influence folks is fairly minimal, but we continue to work with him, and he does continue to go there. We don't have an assembly person. Our assembly seat is vacant right now. And while the staff is still working, it's just not quite the same thing. So, and that, that situation exists in much of Monroe County right now. So, anyway.
I took a round.
Legislative breakfast, we were supposed to meet with, in small groups. Our legislators, some of them came and then they left. They never stuck around, so.
It was.
Yeah.
Well, I took a turn at Rich Funke's table as well, and the board members at that table were very frustrated because he made a nonpartisan issue partisan, really. And I think education, public education, shouldn't be looked at in that way.
What's interesting about this, I don't know the percentage number, I'm trying to get it, but it's startling how many districts now in the state of New York, of the 700 districts, are not represented by somebody in the majority. So the quick dynamics for people to think about, because we get asked all the time, what are you doing around advocacy? And, I don't understand why, one, how could they just keep violating the law? Well, every time the budget is passed, it becomes the law. So the state's not violating the law. The state's violating the formula that they agreed to years ago to use, but they adapt the formula every year based on their needs politically. So it becomes the law. They're not breaking the law. The problem is, and the governor called this out the other day, it's maybe the one and only time I have an agreement with his perspective, the shares concept. If you take a look at the final budget settlement in previous years, likely going to happen again this year, and you look at where the money is driven, the money's not driven to districts based on student need, which is what the formula should drive toward. The formula includes students with special needs, students speaking a new language, it includes poverty. Some aspects of the formula are better than others. There are indices that are used and census data that's used that's old, that could be updated. There's problems with free and reduced lunch where districts direct certify all of their students not accounted for properly. Regardless, if they just use the formula that reflects your present day current student enrollment and the types of kids and what their needs are, it would drive a certain number to every district. This is the point we make every year, but I'm trying to explain it maybe a little bit differently. The problem is they are dividing money up based on regional shares, the piece of the pie that every region in the state thinks they should get. So the percentage that should go to New York City for having a certain percentage of kids, and by the way, it's like 39% and New York City last year got 38% of the money, whatever their need was. By the way, New York City can make the argument that their need was 50% of the money. That's beside the point. It doesn't reflect the student need. Our regional shares on Long Island, the regional shares upstate, Finger Lakes, Central New York, it is entirely a political calculation. So they manipulate the final result of the formula to fit political shares. That's the answer that everybody needs to realize. That's why the money looks the way it looks. If we got the money that we are due, this region's shares would be thrown way off. They'd be too high, which would mean less money for another region of the state. So the governor called that out the other day, and that it is, I think he referred to it as baloney. That is the only thing he's correct about. That is baloney. It shouldn't be driven by political need or political shares. And if you look next year at the solution and you look at a map and break down the shares over the years, it's not based on student need. And everything we know, even about population change, urban centers and the needs in urban centers, or inner ring districts, first ring districts. We know those needs have increased, but somehow in the shares they haven't. It's just another way to look at it, an explanation of why it happens the way it happens. Finally, I'll just say this around dynamics. Finally, it'll be like 2 months of this, sorry. But remember that the assembly is a majority, a vast majority, Democrat controlled. And this is not a political statement, this is what the reality is. Because of the population number driving the number of assembly seats that you have relative to the Senate and the way seats are apportioned in the Senate by Senate districts, the vast majority of seats in the state assembly are in New York City. Does New York City pay a school tax? No. They need rent control, they're interested in mayoral control, but not in foundation aid in the same way or in property tax cap. It's a totally different dynamic. And in the Senate, it used to be that the Senate Republican majority, not my political position, I'm not saying that, generally represented upstate then because of the way the districts were drawn, and they had a Republican majority that were controlled by upstate districts. That is no longer the case. So our representation in terms of Joe Robach being in the majority, and Senator Funke said it himself, his words, not mine, they are not in the majority any longer. I will say, fortunately, Senator Mayer from Westchester, so upstate for New York City people, but not really upstate relative to us, is very interested in this being a problem and in all kids. And when Mark and I and Lou met with her a few weeks ago, was committed to all the state's kids. And I really do believe that, actually. But
Well, and I think
it's
that-
different than the upstate, downstate conversation used to be.
But I also think that the way we're distributing it, this issue, butting up against the tax cap, districts across the state are going to come up against structural deficits. That will push the issue to a head. They'll all be going over the tax cap and voting budgets at some point. Because regardless if you're receiving 100%, it still might not be enough when you talk about the tax cap. Right? We're still going to get to a point where all of us have that issue.
Well, let's
It's
just
coming.
be honest and call it for what it is. The governor has said spend less money. That's what he's saying, spend less money. How do you spend less money? You offer less program. Because they are not willing to give more money, and they reduce your ability to tax the community. Right, wrong, or indifferent, again, that is just the simple math,
So-
is spend less money.
The point I made to Senator Funke's aide was that when we talk about, well, if you need to spend less money, that means reducing programs. Programs are a euphemism for employees. It means please have fewer employees,
Correct.
right? So that's a looming unemployment issue across the state potentially.
We are, public education in Monroe County is among, if not the largest employer, taken collectively.
Yep.
80 cents of every dollar spent on public education returns to the local economy because it is funding the people working.
It's the people. I don't think talk about people.
So anyways, we
Yep,
could do this
sorry.
all.
Okay, just to highlight, we're just trying to drive attendance to the forum, is what we're trying to do there. The other, so upcoming legislative committee, March 4th meeting, we're going to do a debrief, a full debrief of the breakfast. We know it wasn't the most successful year of the breakfast, given circumstances, but we're also going to spend quite a bit of time on the advocacy rebranding that we've talked about, as far as going to appointments locally, whether to do these Albany trips, how best to advocate. And part of that strategy is the one that Kevin and Lou and I, and we've developed, and the Fight for Brighton folks have developed. And part of that strategy is going to leadership, even though they technically don't represent us in terms of voting for them, but going to leadership in the Senate and the Assembly on the education side and Ways and Means and wherever we can get a door open and explaining the situation. And so that's part of I think an increasing strategy that we're all going to have to follow. We're also going to do, and I don't know if you saw, if it got circulated everybody yet, but local appointments. we are making local appointments. If it's something that people want to join in on, I'll keep you posted. Again, our situation's a little bit different, so. All right then. We're done with that part of it. BOCES report. Mark, do you have anything from our BOCES?
Well, the last meeting was canceled because of weather.
Okay.
And they're going to meet this Thursday. But Sora tells me that they have a New York State grant to establish, well, there is a New York State grant, I should say, for 3 recovery high schools, not residential, for outpatient treatment. And one of these 3 schools will be in our area. So that's,
okay.
yeah.
That's
That's
interesting.
pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, that is a good thing.
And that's all she has.
Okay, thank you. We also have tonight other board member reports. We've talked a lot about activities, but does anyone have anything they'd like to share in terms of their individual activity since a month ago, since we reported out? I guess, Christina, did you have anything?
No, the Extended Studies Committee did meet, but I unfortunately missed it.
Okay.
I think we're just wrapping up our ELA review, doing surveys, evaluating them, and then getting back together as a group, and wellness. Still within, each school is working on their building bridges of trust. And lastly, our diversity committee for the special ed has worked on some more data collection and, sort of identifying relevant experiences that our children are having. So,
Okay.
so all just kind of plugging away.
Great. And if you wouldn't mind me putting you on the spot, Julene's away tonight, but Say Yes to the Dress, you were
Yeah,
actively
yeah.
involved in that
Yep.
also?
Yeah, it was a great day.
Was a great success and a great day?
Right, well over 100 articles left the building. We were in a different spot, which was
Challenging?
a little challenging, smaller for us. It worked. We still had our seamstresses there who were fixing dresses and tuxes for the guys. We had a lot more men come.
Great.
And more suits, and yeah, it was great. It was
That's fantastic.
a really wonderful day.
Well, again, our thanks to Julene, certainly, but
Yep.
all of you that work on that and the folks who donate, and it's just a really neat thing and a great thing. And
Fantastic.
if you stop in there during that day and you see the faces on
Yeah.
the kids when they found things that they want and they're ready to go, and yeah, it's really, really pretty.
Because it was a smaller space, we had fewer things, but it seemed to be that we had as many go out. So I
Okay.
think what was there was great.
Good.
And used, and we still collect. It's not over.
Year-round
We'll-
collection.
It's a year-round
So that
collection.
the
so.
inventory is robust
Right.
every year, yeah.
Mhm.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Larry?
Obviously, Mark, we had the audit committee meeting on February 11th, Karen, myself, and you. I'm comforted by the fact that routine, like,
Yeah, it was a
very
good
tight
meeting, yep.
compliments to Dahlia and the team there for the great work they do there. Taxpayers should feel very comfortable that their money is well accounted for, so pretty routine meeting from that standpoint. OACM, or the contractor meetings we're doing for all the projects, occur every other Monday. We've had a couple of challenges, as everybody knows, a sensitive subject with the auditorium, but we think we got a couple of things straightened around in terms of some things we found and what the contractors were willing to hoof, and a couple others. Kudos to Lou and the team, just because we were very focused on watching our dollars there. But work continues, and if you have the chance to drive by Council Rock, it's really starting to look different.
Physically,
Yeah.
really different.
Go in from the
now.
Highland side, not from the Clover side, but on the Highland side, but the school is really starting to take shape, and it's fall of '21, but it's really starting to take
Yeah,
shape.
yeah, it really, it is interesting. I sort of try to have a habit of getting over there every couple of weeks just to see the progress. And now, you can see it's a new building.
Yeah.
But that hiking path on the alongside of it, I'll go on every so
Yeah.
often, and it's pretty crazy to
Yeah.
see the change.
Yeah.
It looks like an entirely different
Yeah.
building.
There's a lot more work to go, and it'll come right down to the wire, because that's what construction
That's what it
projects
does.
are, but it will be great.
Yeah, well, that's great. Karen, anything new?
Nothing.
Marv, anything to add?
Nope.
Okay. Then we will move on tonight. Special guest here for our Brighton Teachers Association report. We have representing us, representing them, Judy Whiteman.
Yeah, thank you so much. Very happy to report on what's been happening with the Brighton Teachers Association. On Thursday, February 6th, the Brighton Teachers Association and Brighton Central Schools partnered together to welcome union leadership from the New York State United Teachers to Brighton. NYSED is going on a statewide bus tour shedding light on the foundation aid issue, which we know is affecting us in particular. Brighton was pleased to be one of the districts chosen for the visit. We were able to offer them quite a bit of helpful information around the issue. BTA members shared their perspective as to how the lack of aid impacts the work we do with our children and families. And we were able to take the group around to a couple of our buildings and hear directly from some of our students. Very successful visit, and I want to especially thank our Brighton administration for partnering with us for this event. At Council Rock, Robin Ackerman and Ashley Rhodes, two teachers, welcomed a local author by the name of Robin Flanagan to their classroom. Ms. Flanagan participated in some activities in their classrooms, all based on her book, M is for Mindful. And apparently that relationship is going to continue throughout the year as Robin and Ashley pilot some curriculum to support that particular book. Kindergarten class, Ms. Flanagan's kindergarten class enjoyed having friends and family in for a Hunger Helpers Sing-Along, a culminating event for a citizenship unit on responsibility. Children learned about responsibility at home and school and the larger community, and the group decided to, remember these are 5-year-olds, they decided to collect food for the Brighton food cupboard, and then on January 31st, friends and families joined together for their food drive and community building songs. They counted all the food, grouped them by tens, and between the two morning and afternoon classes collected almost 300 food items for the Brighton food cupboard. And you have some pretty amazing photos there from that particular event. Nicole Yurley's worked on, she's also a Council Rock second grade teacher. Her students wrote some poetry and using inspiration from a book by Leo Leone, A Color of His Own. They wrote color poems focusing on the literary devices of similes, metaphors, and analogies. And then a similar lesson will be shared with second grade students in sixth grade classes at a school in Israel, which Nicole is actually on her way back from now. At Council Rock, the Building Goal Committee offered families the opportunity to learn more about Council Rock's 4 upcoming spring focus habits of mind. Using an online learning model, families learned about a habit each week, including striving for accuracy, finding humor, communicating with clarity and precision, and listening with understanding and empathy. There is an activity for families to engage in each week. Over 250 people entered onto that webpage to participate, and Council Rock continues to grow and develop as a recognized international Habits of Mind School of Excellence. At French Road, teacher Lonnie Mazurowski also had the opportunity over break to travel to Israel, and she's been preparing her class to learn and share more with a partnered class from Israel. And as part of the exchange, each class created a book of special places around them. So in Israel, they read the book by Dr. Seuss, The Places You'll Go. And here in Brighton, Lonnie's class read Babar's USA. And this book uses photo illustration montage technique to incorporate Babar characters into photos of places around the United States. Her class then created a similar book using a green screen to add themselves into photos of places around Rochester, and those photos will accompany the pieces of writing that Lonnie took with her on the trip. It's a very fun project. There's a great picture there. In fifth grade class, Mr. Simmons' fifth grade class, they had a guest. Cameron Lopez, who is from Mr. Simmons' fifth grade class, was the guest speaker for Mrs. Harp's technology classes. So it's a fifth grader is the guest speaker for the technology classes. And Cameron came to talk to the students about the solar system and using NASA resources. And in particular, Cameron described how the Saturn V rocket was launched to bring astronauts to the moon. He actually created a model of this, took him over 8 hours to create, and it comes apart in sections just like the real thing. It's cool to have a student presenting to other students. Also at French Road, Mrs. Cole's music classes just finished up a unit on Star Wars music, learning different rhythms, practicing their music literacy skills, analyzing forms of music, and using lightsabers as far as part of choreography to music. And they're now moving on to creating their actual own composed pieces, moving on to music inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., creating a march for love, peace, and hope. In third grade, Jamie Schenk's third grade class had a distance learning opportunity to connect with a ranger from Kenjal Fjords National Park in Seward, Alaska. And they learned about why we have national parks. We were able to speak directly to this ranger. She shared how glaciers are formed, features of a glacier. She also gave an appreciation of glaciers and helped them to understand how they formed the lakes and land here in New York State. At 12 Corners Middle School, they recognized World Hijab Day on January 31st. It's an opportunity to engage in a learning experience that supports our commitment to diversity and inclusion. Through a generous grant from the Nancy Beck Fund, they were able to purchase hijabs for the event and make buttons for boys to wear. The Brighton High School Muslim Student Union sent students to help with the event, and more than 40 participated. There's also a group of 12 Corners Middle School and Brighton High School English as New Language students. They'll have their own immigration stories published in an upcoming book as part of the Green Card Youth Voices project. Green Card Voices of Western New York. Very excited to be interviewed for the book, and will be working on their final copy of their stories this spring for publication in September. Also at the middle school, thanks to a generous grant from the Nancy Beck Memorial Fund, the 12 Corners Middle School Library is now able to offer a class set of Logitech headphones suitable for audio recording and editing. This grant makes it possible for TCMS classrooms to equitably provide recording and editing headsets for use in creating digital knowledge products. They'll be put to use immediately in Chris Coyle's Extended Studies classroom, where students are creating podcasts for the New York Times podcasting contest. I remember when contests were posters, now they're podcasts. At Brighton High School, the JV girls basketball team volunteered at the Center for Youth, as well as donating clothes. The girls are also collecting food until the end of the season to donate to the Center of Youth's food pantry. And finally, among other trips, Brighton High School German Bremen exchange trip left on Wednesday, February 12th. It's one of the longest standing school exchanges since 1981, and it's still a very popular opportunity for students. 22 students participating this year, very excited to meeting their German host families and making lifelong friends. And that is my report.
Great.
Thanks, Judy.
My pleasure.
This evening. We appreciate
Yeah.
it. Our PTSA report, we have Nicole and Leslie both here tonight, so, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. So we'll start with
Nicole was on a bus coming
yes.
back from.
It's
I'm in
it's an
Nicole's
N
seat,
name. It's
sorry.
okay.
No idea that I made it this far. But anyway.
It's perfectly all right. The Central PTSA at our last meeting had, which was on February 12th, and it was a noon meeting. It was very well attended. We had a registered dietitian named Leslie Serve speak about kids' nutritional habits. She offered ideas pointing to the fact that many of our older kids start at 7 a.m. and go until sometimes 10 o'clock at night without sitting down for a meal. She had information on macronutrients, calories, and gave ideas also on lunches for young and older children and what sort of packs the best punch. She also included some really yummy snacks samples, so that was kind of fun. We also have finalized a date for our screening of Beyond Measure at the JCC. That's scheduled for May 5th, and we're still working out other details about that evening. Let's see. We are also, in terms of the Central PTSA, we are working on creating our budget committees and our nominating committees for this year. And we also are looking to start a new fundraising committee as well. And then for the schools, I'll do Council Rock first, and then Leslie will continue. The Council Rock PTSA hosted their Super Bowl on the Monday after the Super Bowl for the teachers. Parents provided an assortment of soups and chilies. About a dozen were donated in total. The PTSA got approval for a Nancy Beck grant to build a little free library on the front of the school, which will go up after construction ends. They held a meeting with the principal jointly with SPED in January, and they also are planning their ice cream social and book fair in April, and are also planning a extracurricular fair also happening in April. So that's happening at Council Rock.
And at French Road, PTSA finished up their last round of roller skating for this school year. They held their second family movie night. They sold pizza, popcorn, and candy. They showed the movie Abominable, and it was very well attended. Upcoming in mid-March is PTSA Summer and Activities Fair. They are trying something new by having a meeting with the principal concurrent with the first hour of the fair in a different room. This is another one of their efforts to try to get more people to attend the meetings with the principal. And then also upcoming at the end of March will be the 3rd and 4th grade ice cream socials. And at the middle school, the PTSA held a book club meeting based on the book Helping Your Anxious Teen by Dr. Sheila Akar Josephs. It was a great discussion with Rob Thomas and parents in attendance, led by local counselor Jennifer Thompson. Next week, they will be having a joint meeting with SPED, and the topic will be executive functioning and will be presented by TCMS teacher Beth Goldberg. For the upcoming Brighton Believes Day, PTSA will be helping with the reception for the nonprofit presenters by providing goodie bags, decorations, and sign-in help. The next meeting with the principal will be dealing with sports in the middle school and high school. And at BHS, just prior to midterms, PTSA coordinated with the counseling department to host Cocoa and Cram for freshmen. There were some pictures. PTSA also provided snacks for student council's Snowball. And the meeting with the principal that month focused on student schedules and course selection with further explanation of different high school diploma options. That's that.
Wonderful, thank you guys very much, we appreciate the full report. Dr. McGowan, Superintendent's report.
A couple quick items. One, there, as Theo mentioned, 82 students abroad, which is really amazing, and a lot of people supporting that. The trips were mentioned several times. I want to point this out because it came up in the thought exchange. Not one penny of district funds, taxpayer funds, is used for that. The trips are paid for through the students paying, or in the case of the Israel trip, the Jewish Federation, and in some cases, some of the people participating actually pay their way. So I want to make sure that that's clear to people, that these are folks going to supervise our kids. There's a stipend paid when people are supervising kids, but in terms of the trip expense itself, airfare, et cetera, like that, that's included with the student trip. So we are not sending people around the world for either professional development or for pleasure trips. This is all something that is supervision of kids and profoundly impactful. So I love that this was unplanned, but Judy's recitation of all the different exchanges. The kids who are there are having an incredible experience. The educators are having an incredible experience, again, paid for by others and not by the district. But the way that has expanded to these incredible partnerships for classrooms, and the way all of our kids are being exposed to relationships around the world and understanding human beings in a very different way, and the things that unite us as opposed to the things that divide us, is a really profound experience for kids in so many classrooms throughout the district. So we're grateful for that. We're grateful for the parents that support that, and also for the Jewish Federation in Rochester, who supports the exchange with Israel. That's become a really big part of what we do here, and we're grateful for that.
Point. It's an actual exchange, so all of those groups come here.
Yes, and
so
stay with families.
They come and share with us and stay with our families, and we learn from them. So it's a tremendous experience.
The adults and the kids, Israeli staff members and students who come here and have that experience.
But
too.
also with the French exchange and
Yes.
the Bremen
All of them,
exchange.
the Bremen exchange,
Yeah.
all of them do that. Yeah.
Just want to make sure you point that out. But you know, the 82 kids abroad right now, and or just returning, what a great experience for each of them. So, Brighton Believes Day is next Wednesday. I love just to recite the purpose that is stated for the day: to engage all Brighton students in a day of service that provides opportunities to demonstrate the Brighton Believes qualities and provide an opportunity K-12 to practice caring and our collective responsibility to help others. So if you think about how really fascinating that is that our K-12 kids and staff members next Wednesday are engaged in a day of caring for other people and thinking about our collective responsibility for the people to the right of us and to the left of us. It's a really, really special day, and really proud of our kids and staff members and the many parents that volunteer and participate in that, all the support throughout the community. So much good is done, and those lessons carry themselves throughout the whole year. So thanks to everybody for their support of that. We, of course, have the community forum tonight at 7. Looking forward to feedback from the community, and it is also a Facebook Live event, at least for the first portion of it, from 7 to 7:30. It's hard to participate in the group conversations in the room if you're on Facebook Live, but at the beginning of the meeting, we encourage everybody to jump onto that or to come here and join us to give us feedback on the budget process. And yes, you mentioned the strings concert tomorrow night in addition to sectional play. And again, thanks to Judy, the BTA, their partnership, and the New York State United Teachers for including us in their tour. That was a really great event, and we had many advocates, and NICED's been a big part of that, advocating for more state aid for our kids and for programs, and the great work that is done by our staff. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we have a few items of business remaining to wrap things up. May we have a motion, please, to approve the resolution as prepared by Kim for our official newspapers for the district?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Marv, seconded by Larry. It's pretty self-explanatory. I think we actually do this twice
Yeah.
at the organization and the calendar
Yeah.
year. So it is what it is. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll have just a brief reminder, but a motion to approve the estimated tax cap levy limit is prepared by Lou Alimo to Dr. McGowan on to us, please.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Karen and seconded by Christina. As Dr. McGowan mentioned earlier, this is a formality. The paperwork is due into Albany by the 1st. We have no choice, but it is what it is. Once all the numbers are fed into the system, then the estimated tax cap levy limit is set. And as you mentioned, it's 3.33%, and that's basically what we're approving to be sent on paperwork-wise. We would make it different if we could, but it is what it is. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? A motion, please, for approval of tentative agreement between the Brighton Association of Educational Office Professionals and the district.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Karen and seconded by Marv. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And also then approval of a memorandum of agreement by and between the Brighton non-teaching salaried supervisors and the district.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Larry and seconded by Karen? No, Andrea. Andrea? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And our consent agenda this evening, a motion to approve.
So move?
Second.
Moved by Andrea, seconded by Larry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Any other items of business, Board, Dr. McGowan? All right, then I remind folks that we will reconvene at 7 p.m. for our community budget forum. Motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Karen, seconded by Larry. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.